All right, my friends, should blue belts be teaching classes? I've seen this for years. I've seen this argument. I have some thoughts on it, and I want to get them across because I hear some of the dumbest responses ever when it's in this particular subject. Guys, my name is Bill Jones. I am the head instructor of top-level martial arts in beautiful downtown Cuyahoga Falls. Black belt under Master Pedro Sauer and Tony Rinaldi. You're watching Professor's Corner. Who should teach classes? Man, the first time I saw this this question come up was actually when the Gracie Academy started releasing their original iteration of Gracie Combatives. And, they were promoting people online at that time to blue belt. Now, that has since changed to some degree. But what happened was those people who got promoted to blue belt would then go on and teach in Gracie garages. And let's understand that none of these are designed to be money-making enterprises for the person learning. And what I mean is, one of the stipulations of a Gracie garage is that it is free for the people who are participating in it. But that's when I started seeing a lot of stuff on like Bullshido, which I don't even know if that's still a thing. It used to be a forum called Bullshido that kind of went around and dojo stormed people they didn't think were actually teaching right stuff and tried to call out people on the internet. And I think that that recently they've gotten a lot of flack because, especially for me, they've had two people who were under me that they tried to do that to. And they're like, oh, look, this person's teaching. They don't have a certificate. That they didn't even bother to call me and say, hey, are you actually this guy's instructor? Why is this guy teaching? They just decided to write, I would say as typical social media, write negative things and try to find the truth behind it. Never, right? Just let people be negative. And I think that's a lot of what's going on when I see blue belts teaching. I think a lot of people who think that's a bad idea are just being negative and have never taken the time to truly examine what it is they're saying. Now, if we had a class of, say, black belts that were being taught by a blue belt, that wouldn't make a lot of sense to me, right? So I don't see where that would happen. So that's rarely the case. That because the biggest thing I hear is, oh, blue belts don't know enough to teach. All right, fair. So who are they teaching? That's my first question. Are they teaching people who already know what they're doing? I would argue that the answer to that is probably no. So, if you take a blue belt who you believe has met a certain standard, why can't they show the things that they know to the level they know to people who don't know anything, right? To white belts and kids. It doesn't make sense to expect them to have a black belt level of knowledge before they start showing people things. And in fact, one of the things that you learn through teaching is how to be better at the things you're teaching. Personally, even as a second degree black belt at the time of filming here, I quite often learn and understand things better when I take the time to dissect them. I want to teach, my series from, say, top half guard. I then have to take that series apart. I have to look at what I'm doing and say, oh, okay, because sometimes I just move on feeling, right? I have to say, well, what is the actual trigger here? What is actually going on? What is truly causing this, so that I can then take that material apart and put it in a digestible content for someone to actually learn it. Because for me to just say, well, look, here you're going to feel that they're doing this, and then you're just going to turn here, and I've seen people teach that way, and it's horrible. Those people are horrible teachers. Many of them are high-level black belts, and that's an important thing to understand, is that just because someone's a black belt doesn't mean they know how to teach. Just because someone's a blue belt doesn't mean they don't. Let me ask you this. If that blue belt, if you went on to find out that blue belt is a math teacher who has a certificate in teaching, who has, does continuing education every year on how to best disseminate information to people, would that change your view? I think it would. I think you'd say, of course that person knows how to break things down and give it to someone, but they shouldn't be teaching people who already know what they're doing. Well, of course not. I don't know any school where a blue belt teaches a black belt, at least not in that way. Now, certainly sometimes you have an all-American wrestler, and he happens to be a blue belt, but, we're doing takedowns that day, and so you ask for input from them, of course. But my point is, I don't know of any school, of any place of learning where they take the person who knows less and has them teach the person who knows more, right? Doesn't happen in college. I've never seen an undergrad teach PhDs, it just doesn't happen. Or when it does, it's definitely the very rare occasion. So I think that what we're misunderstanding is when you say that blue belts shouldn't be teaching, I don't think you're taking into account what teaching is and how it's done. Let me ask you this. If you have a child who's, let's say, a first grader, and they're learning math, would you expect that their math teacher understands math in the same way a PhD calculus professor does in college? Or even take it a step further, a theoretical physicist who does, quantum equations all the time? I would hope that you understand the answer to that is no. Now, they may be able to have a discussion with that person, an intelligent discussion, but they're not going to understand it to the same level. They don't use it that way. They maybe even haven't learned it that way. What they've learned is how to disseminate the basic information of elementary education to children of that age. Same thing with, third graders or eighth graders. You're going to expect that people teaching to a higher level of student have a higher level of knowledge and maybe even a higher capability of disseminating that knowledge. The reason this came up and the reason I was upset about it was I saw a video today of a jiu-jitsu academy that's clearly just trying to do its best in a crazy situation that is the 2020 pandemic. Whether you believe in it or not, there's a lot of restrictions going on, and this instructor, who was a blue belt, was clearly teaching some sort of socially distanced class. Everybody had masks on, and it's like, do we expect that school to just not open, or do we expect them to have some ingenuity and develop a cool drill that the kids were doing? They had belts, like a belt tied across, like from one end of the academy to the other, really taut, almost like a tightrope. And the other kids had thrown gi jackets over it, and they were like practicing cross chokes and kind of movements on this. And I thought, man, what ingenuity. That's a really good idea. And all the comments were like, oh, you should shut down, or like if you don't feel safe, don't open, or and all those things are just, those comments don't make sense. As long as they're following the restrictions that have been given to them, what else are they supposed to do? And then on top of that, the other comments were, the biggest problem here is that there's a blue belt teaching. These were like 4 and 5-year-old kids. Do you really expect that a black belt has to teach them? Do you think that a blue belt adult human being can't teach 4 and 5-year-old kids some basic mechanics and basic learning skills that are required to get better at jiu-jitsu? If you think that, you're just not correlating it with what happens in reality. That's not how anything works. It's not how any level of education works. No one expects that the gym teacher in the kindergarten is LeBron James if she's going to show them how to shoot a basketball. No one expects that. And, I don't know why you would. Now, who should teach LeBron James? A professional coach, right? Like a high-level coach should be working with LeBron James. Or, who should learn from LeBron James? I don't know, maybe he's a crappy teacher. Maybe no one should learn from him. But let's assume he has some knowledge to give and he knows how to disseminate it. Probably other high-level people. If I personally went through a basketball camp, I would not expect LeBron James to be the one teaching me. I know very little about basketball. I'm not good at it. I just need someone who can teach me the basics of dribbling and, how to do a few things here and there. So it's not required that you're a black belt to teach. I don't think it's required that you're a black belt to teach adults. I don't think it's required that you're a black belt to teach anybody other than higher level jiu-jitsu people. I think if you're a purple belt or above, certainly you probably want to start having some black belts involved in your teaching. Because now you're an advanced rank. Now you've got to be led down a very, very specific path so that you don't get off track. You want someone who can look at you and say, okay, You have this body type, you have this particular skill set. These are probably the ways you want to go. But even at that, I mean, I bring people in for seminars because, maybe a guy's taller and lankier than I am and has some abilities that I do not because of my body type, and has the ability to disseminate a different type of skill set to some of my students, and they're interested in that. Or maybe I bring in a guy who's great at leg locks because I'm only mediocre at them, and I want to get better at them, but I want my students to see that. Different people have different skill sets, and to expect that a black belt is the only one who can teach is just outright foolishness. And I've heard it said and repeated so many times that I think it's just foolish. I've met many black belts who have no place teaching. I've met many blue belts who are excellent teachers. Anyway, guys, I hope this has been interesting to you. I want to know your thoughts on it. Who do you prefer to learn from? Do you prefer to learn from black belts? Does it matter to you? Are you at the level where you honestly say, look, I roll a black belt, I roll a brown belt, it feels the same to me, I'm just getting my butt kicked? Because if that's the truth, it doesn't matter which one's teaching you. All right, guys, talk to you later. Have a great day.